Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be doing two different things. Firstly, I'm going to just update you on the children's python hatchlings. I haven't showed them since they've hatched. It's been about 2 months, so I figured I owe you guys that. Yeah, I meant to kind of update you all on them sooner, I just haven't honestly got around to it. But I'm also going to dedicate this video to basically showing how to get hatchlings to eat. Because one thing that seems to happen sometimes is when you hatch a clutch of eggs, whether that be children's python eggs or carpet python eggs or something else, sometimes you get hatchlings that just won't feed no matter what you do, and they get really skinny and you kind of just end up pulling your hair out trying to get them to eat something. So in this video I'm going to show just some of the little tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that have helped get some hatchlings to eat that normally wouldn't eat. So this is one of the hatchlings out of the clutch. They have actually grown since hatching, obviously, but yeah, they've basically doubled their size nearly since hatching. As you can see, this one's quite a nervous little snake. He's quite whippy and wiry. They are all a bit nippy because they're babies, and that's just expected. They're basically afraid of everything bigger than them, which is normal. But it is something that they do kind of grow out of as they get bigger, and as you handle them, they realize that you're not a threat and they lose that defensiveness. But at the moment, they do just have that kind of defensive nature, as you can see. Thankfully, they're so small they can't hurt you. So this particular little fella has already had a few meals since hatching, so he's one of the ones that he's eating relatively well. I have some of my clutch that aren't eating as well. Saying that, I've still managed to get them to eat. It's just not as simple as just offering them a piece of food and letting them eat it like you would a snake that's more established. So there's another one of the hatchlings. This one is a little bit more docile than the first one I had. She'll still give you a nip here and there, but yeah, as you can see, I don't have to actually hold this one back when I'm holding it. The other one just wants to run. This one will kind of chill out if you stay calm with it, but if you frighten it, it will just give you a nip, but again, that's kind of expected. So I've actually got all these little fellas on pinkies at the moment. It's kind of all they can manage. When they first hatched, they were obviously a little bit smaller than this, and I was skeptical, to be honest, about them eating even pinkies because they're a lot smaller than a carpet python hatchling, and that's usually what you'd feed carpet python hatchlings when they start out, is just pinkies. But I couldn't really get anything smaller, so pinkies it was. Thankfully, they were able to down the pinky, so no problem there. So I'm feeding them a pinky once every 2 weeks. Normally with little hatchlings, I would feed them once a week. But these are much smaller than, say, carpet python hatchlings, and so for them, a pinky is a much bigger meal. So I've got them on every 2 weeks instead of every week, because honestly, after they eat a pinky, they look so chunky and fat because it is kind of a big meal for them. Thankfully, they're growing really fast, so it won't be long before I can get them onto a once a week feeding schedule when a pinky becomes more of a normal sized meal for them. Getting these guys to eat was a bit of a struggle at the start as well. So I had to wait about 2 weeks before even offering them food, because when hatchlings first pop out of their eggs, they've absorbed the yolk from the egg. So that kind of keeps them going for a bit. They've already got some food reserves in them, so that usually lasts them 1 to 2 weeks. So after about 2 weeks, I started offering them food and they just didn't want it. Not a single one of these hatchlings, all 9 of them, none of them would eat. And so I had to start trying just little different things to help encourage them to eat. So obviously the first thing I was doing was just simply offering them food on tongs like you would normally do. And yeah, they just turned away from it, no interest at all. Even the ones that would nip at it out of defensiveness just ran away. So the next thing I tried was basically isolating the snakes in a container with the food. Now, I've found that this is not a very highly successful way to get them to eat. It is kind of a lower stress way to do it though, so I would still try it first, even if it's not as successful as certain other ways, just because it's less stressful for the animal. So basically you just put the snake in a small container overnight with the pinky mouse. And because it's in close quarters with its food, maybe it'll just become enticed to eat it, but usually it's not the case. I've found that this only works maybe like 2 times out of 10. every time I've used this technique, it's very rarely worked. This is mainly because, especially with most of your pythons that have heat sensing pits, their food has to be warm for them to register it as a food item, and the mouse just cools down. So they just ignore it. Yeah, I mean, some carpet pythons might take it because they're just not as finicky with feeding. But yeah, I have not found the greatest success with leaving them in a container with food overnight, at least with pythons. If you're feeding stuff that doesn't have heat sensing pits, you have a higher success rate. Like if you're feeding wormer pythons or blackheads or various types of colubrids, it probably will work a bit better for you. Technique number 2, and this is another one I've had mixed results with, but a higher success rate than leaving them in a container with the food. And it's a bit gross, but actually splitting the pinky mouse's head open sometimes will encourage them to want to eat it. So I don't know what it is exactly, but something about the smell of the brains of the pinky, it must be a different smell, or obviously it is a different smell to the rest of the mouse. And it must be an enticing one, because sometimes I'll do that to hatchlings that wouldn't have no interest in food at all. I'll do that and they'll eat it. Usually they won't actually strike it. They'll kind of take their time to work out what it is and then just grab it. So I'll hold the pinky's head up to the snake's mouth with the split head, and the snake will basically kind of slowly start smelling where the split is. And it'll start actually sticking its tongue inside the skull of the mouse, which is as horrible as that sounds. Almost like really smelling it, and then it'll just grab it. So this can sometimes work. I haven't had this work with this clutch of children's pythons, but I've had it work in the past with hatchling children's pythons. I've had it work with various colubrid species that just wouldn't take food otherwise. It got to the point where I had this one children's python's hatchling quite some years ago, that I had to do that for a good 6 months, otherwise it wouldn't even take the food. So it became very dependent on that, but it got it eating. So that's something else you could try. Just make sure when you do it, you do actually have to split the skull so the brains are exposed. As I know, kind of disgusting, as horrible as that sounds, you do have to do that, and yeah, it might work. Knowing what sort of snake you have will make a big difference as well in terms of what you can do to get it to eat. For example, if you're keeping just like a python, they're more or less just going to be eating like rodents in the wild. So just offering pinky mice would be fine, and just trying various techniques with those. But if you're keeping a colubrid of some sort, depending what type, some colubrids specialize in eating other snakes, some colubrids specialize in eating lizards or fish. So you might have to just try some different things there. For example, if you're keeping a colubrid that likes to eat fish, like Australian green tree snakes will sometimes only take fish, and you really have to work with them to wean them onto mice. And that's all well and good if you're happy to buy feeder fish on the regular, but weaning them onto mice is a bit of a challenge, but it can be done. So sometimes you'll have to actually kind of rub fish on the mouse so the mouse smells of fish. Things like that can sometimes help. Same with snakes that specialize in eating either lizards or other snakes. You may have to actually rub the smell of a lizard onto the mouse. Now, if you have a lizard as a pet already, that can kind of help. You can actually keep some of the shed skin from that pet lizard. If it's a fresh shed, that's even better, and rub that on the mouse. But yeah, it's generally kind of difficult sometimes. It just depends on the colubrid you're keeping. A lot of people, if they have multiple snakes and they have one type of snake that is a specific snake eater, they'll keep fresh sheds from their other snakes and wrap the mouse in the fresh shed so it smells like a snake. You essentially just make a burrito out of a mouse with a shed skin. So kind of weird, but it's another technique that some people have had success with. But the technique I'm using on these guys, which I found seems to work on them quite well, is forcing them into a position where they have to be defensive. And as a result of that, they end up eating. So what I mean by that is, if I was to just say offer this one a pinky mouse while it's in its enclosure, it more or less just goes into flight mode instead of fight mode. So I'll offer it the food, and rather than want to actually eat the food, it'll just tuck its head under its body, or it'll try to run away, won't even look at it. But if I take it out of its container and I sit it on the table or on the floor or somewhere in the open where it's a bit exposed, it knows it can't hide anywhere, so it gets defensive instead. And this is how I get it to eat, because it'll get defensive, strike at the food. Sometimes it'll strike and let go, like it's just a defensive strike, but eventually it will actually grab onto it. And once it's got it in its mouth for a couple of seconds, it kind of clicks over and realizes, hang on, this is food, and it starts eating it. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean with one of my hatchlings right now. Okay, so I'm going to offer this one some food. You want to make sure the mouse is nice and warm, because you want to play with those heat receptors on their mouth. You want to make sure they can sense the food. So sorry guys, my hand's in the way. You will notice I'm using my hands instead of tongs, and I have a reason for this too, which I'll explain in a sec. As you can see, he's not even interested in the food. No, turns away, no interest. So I'm going to take him out and I'll show you the difference in his personality once he's out. And the reason, guys, I'm using my hands instead of tongs, which I don't recommend doing with bigger snakes, obviously, but the reason is my fingers are warm. And because these snakes have heat sensing pits, if the pinky mouse cools down, which they cool down very quickly, it can focus in on the heat from my fingers instead. And look at that, took it straight away. So I'm going to try the same thing again, guys, just so you know it's not just a fluke. See, bit it and just let go. This one is one of my more aggressive ones, so he might actually just take it. He's a very aggressive, well, defensive one, this one. So you can see the reason I'm using my hands is because I swear they know the pinky's not alive. But if they see my hand coming at them, they're more likely to strike. Get that out of the way. Come on. Come on. You gotta just let them run. Once they stop, they can see what's going on, and they'll strike at it. And there we go. And there you go, guys. The first one's already done eating. Second one's halfway done nearly. I'm going to try one more because I have one more left to feed, and that's basically it for tonight. Same deal as before. See, he's just chilling out in his little hide there, which is flipped over. Offer him some food. No interest. See, he just turns away. Doesn't even want it. I'm going to take him out, put him on the towel like the others. So he's essing up, he's getting agitated because you can see my hand wiggling around. Grab. I swear a huge part of it is to do with my hand being there, holding the mouse. Because I've tried this exact technique, holding the pinkies with tongs, and the result wasn't the same. They were just striking it out of defensiveness, but they weren't hanging on to it. Don't know why. Something about my hand being in the picture, because they see in infrared and they've got their heat sensing pits. My hand's this giant warm thing coming at them. They just put more effort into their strike because they want my hand gone. They strike the mouse so hard that their teeth kind of just get stuck when they grab onto its head. So I do kind of try and line the pinky up so they grab it nose first. So when they hit it nice and hard, the nose of the pinky ends up going right down their throat almost, and their teeth kind of get stuck on the head. At this point, they'll hang on to it for a minute or two, like this one's doing here. And yeah, eventually he'll just kind of realize, oh, the threat of that big hand is gone. I've got this thing in my mouth. I think I can eat this, and he'll start eating it usually. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I have to do with all these guys at the moment. But it seems to work. Well, there you go. There's just some of my techniques that I've acquired over the years that have helped me get hatchlings to eat. Now, I just want to throw out a small disclaimer. I'm in no way saying these techniques will 100% work and get your hatchlings eating. They're just something I've found has worked for me over the years. Unfortunately, because there's so many species of snakes in this hobby and they've all got their own personality too, it's very hard getting hatchlings to eat when they want to be difficult. So I hope this video of mine was helpful, and best of luck to you if that's the situation you're in with your hatchlings. Before I go, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. My Instagram is in the description if you would like to check it out. Don't forget to smash the notification bell so you know when I put new videos up. But until then, I'll see you all in my next video. Bye bye.